Who's making the Rams 53-man roster in part 2 of this series? You'll find out now. All right, guys, welcome back in. I'm Jake Ellenbogen, and today I will be unveiling my part 2 of the Rams 53-man roster projection series. Before I get into it, be sure to subscribe, like, and comment, and let's dive right into this thing. All right, so we start with quarterback here, and this one's pretty simple, at least for me. I mean, obviously you have your starter in Matthew Stafford, and John Wolford is going to be the backup quarterback in all likelihood since he didn't even play in the first preseason game. So that leaves, are we going to keep 2 or are we going to keep 3 quarterbacks since Luis Perez was cut in the first round of cuts? I'm going to say they keep 3 here. I'm going to go with them keeping Bryce Perkins. I think there's a chance Bryce Perkins at the end of the year could be the backup quarterback in LA. I think he offers a lot when you look at his mobility, but also what he was able to do without really any sort of protection. You look at the second and third string offensive line, didn't really keep him, comfortable in the pocket. He was still able to make plays, obviously, hooking up a bunch with Lance McCutcheon and others as well. I was really impressed with his ability and what he showed in preseason. I think the most important thing when it comes to Bryce Perkins that you really want to see is he better in this preseason this year than he was last year? And I think he's made a lot of strides and significant strides at that. And so I definitely think he'll make the roster. There's no doubt about it in my mind. The Rams will not try to put him on waivers because he will not make it through. He will likely go to the Vikings and with Kevin O'Connell, the guy that he met with before he even decided to sign with the Rams as a UDFA. All right, next up here we have the running backs, and this is going to be a little bit of a surprise. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff going on. There's certain players that you probably want on this roster. And I hate to break it to you, but if you want certain players on this roster, you have to give a little to get a little. Until the NFL fixes the fact that there should be more than 53 men on a roster, we're going to run into unfortunate cuts. And this is where we have it. At the running back position, I have them keeping 3 running backs: Cam Akers, Darrell Henderson, and Kyren Williams, the 5th round pick from this year's draft. That means that Jake Funk, Asim Rose, Raymond Calais, and Trey Regis do not make this roster. I really like what Asim Rose has done, looking at preseason, getting that touchdown. I think he flashed some, but I think here's the thing. When people look at Jake Funk, they're excited about him. He's a draft pick. He's a homegrown talent. And this is somebody that plays really good special teams, but I don't think it's enough to combat what Kyren Williams brings to the table. He can play special teams, he can help you in the run game, he can help you in the receiving game, and he's fantastic as a blocker. In pass pro, this guy's already better than Cam Akers on the roster and maybe already better than Darrell Henderson. He is very good in pass pro. It's something that, he really takes seriously. And so, honestly, if you want to do the things that you want to do with this roster, if you want to keep certain guys that we'll get to as this video goes on, you're going to have to make the tough choice. I don't see how Jake Funk is a lock to make this roster. It doesn't mean that the Rams won't keep him, but if they want to do the moves that other people are thinking that they're going to do, or the hope, they're going to have to give a little to get a little. And so I think, in terms of this, you got to cut Jake Funk. You got to roll with just 3 running backs. And I'm sure you can bring one of these guys on the practice squad, in all likelihood, Asim Rose, maybe even Raymond Calais, and go from there. But really, I just don't really see it working out. If you're going to keep 4 running backs, I don't really see the need. Jake Funk doesn't offer a ton as far as on the offensive side. He is a good special teamer, no doubt. He tested extremely well. But when it comes down to it, I think Kyren Williams offers everything and more. And so I decided to keep 3 running backs here. Next up, we have the most bolstered receiver room that I've ever seen. Obviously, if you can find it out there, let me know. But I don't think I've ever seen a receiver room like this. I have the Rams keeping 8 receivers. That's right, 8 receivers. We talked about this. We talked about it all week. I told you that I felt that Lance McCutcheon, there's no doubt about it, they have to keep him on the roster at least until midseason when OBJ comes back in all likelihood and does hopefully sign with the Rams. I do think they have to keep him, though, because they're not going to be able to pick him up through waivers. They're not going to be able to add him to the practice squad. He is going to get claimed. There are many teams out there, and I just don't see him making it past waivers. You don't want to see him on a rival. You don't want to see him on, a team that you have to face, come, playoff time and all that. I mean, this is somebody that can contribute right away. I know it sounds crazy, but under the right circumstances, if you had to throw Lance McCutcheon in there with a good quarterback, he could produce in this league, no doubt about it. So I don't think you can let him go. You can't afford it. Obviously, you got Cooper Kupp, you got Allen Robinson, Van Jefferson. We'll see what happens with his injury, but I can't imagine that they're going to place him on the PUP list or the IR list, anything like that that'll make him have to sit out 4 games. There's a chance he plays week 1, so there makes 0 sense to put him on a list where he would have to sit out the first 4 games of the season. So I think he's going to be added to the 53 instead of going on an injured list. In addition to that, you have Tutu Atwell, Ben Skoranek, Jacob Harris, Brandon Powell, and Lance McCutcheon. I have all 8 making the team. I understand it's loaded, but look, Brandon Powell does a great job in, the return game. He's been working on it, on the offensive side of the ball. You look at the special teams ability of Ben Skoranek. You look at the special teams, the blocking, and obviously the preseason that he's had, and, it's no doubt about it. Lance McCutcheon has to be on this team. In addition to that, obviously Jacob Harris is the one that, people might actually believe is on the bubble. I don't think so. You spent a 4th-round pick last year on him. This is somebody that they are raving about as far as his athletic profile is concerned. He is back from injury. We'll see if he plays this week in preseason, if not next week. But this is not a guy I expect them to cut. So why not keep all 8 of these guys? You have to trim some fat. This is kind of like what I was alluding to with the Jake Funk move, not bringing him on to the 53. I think this makes a lot of sense. If you want to have 8, if you want them to keep Lance McCutcheon, be prepared that maybe a guy that you like and you don't want to leave and you might not expect him to get cut will get cut. This is when things like that happen, when you have to make, obvious moves and you have to account for the fact that these guys have made an impact in preseason, have put themselves out there, good tape out there, everyone knows about them, and now you have to make a surprising cut that maybe you didn't want to make in the past. So keep that in mind. As the Rams continue to develop their roster, they're going to have to make the tough decision. This is why I had Jake Funk leaving, because now I have them keeping 8 receivers. Now, I understand that, and I've said this before, I'll say it again, the Rams to feel good about themselves in this regard, to make the argument to keeping 8 receivers, they could classify Jacob Harris, at least on their roster, as a tight end. Doesn't mean he has to play there, but they could look at it in the numbers game as him being a tight end, which would make it feel a little bit better, only having 7 wide receivers when in reality of 8. So that's what I have. I have all 8 receivers making it, of the good ones there. Of course, that does mean that Landon Akers, Austin Trammell, and J.J. Koski missed the cut. I think Koski did get banged up a little bit, his shoulder in practice, so hopefully he's okay. Maybe he can come back on the practice squad. In addition to that, Landon Akers, same deal. And Austin Trammell's the one that stood out the most to me out of those 3. Guy has barely been on the roster, and I thought he had a really nice preseason game against the Chargers. So he's a name to look out for, I guess, if they do add him to the practice squad. Maybe an injury or something happens, he's allowed to, come up and play on special teams. Seems like a guy that you might want to keep around in the building if you can. So those guys are cut, unfortunately for them, in this projection. But I do have the Rams keeping Lance McCutcheon, and rightfully so. Next up are the tight ends here, and I have no surprises here. Tyler Higbee, Kendall Blanton, and Bryson Hopkins as your 3 tight ends. Like I said, you could argue Jacob Harris could also be included here as a 4th tight end. So I do have the Rams cutting Roger Carter and Jared Pinkney. And unfortunately, as I mentioned earlier, in the week, Jamal Pettigrew was cut by the Rams in the cut of 90 to 85. And so because of that, he doesn't have to be cut in this scenario. He's already been cut from the roster. Could see him on the practice squad. Could see Roger Carter. But I think it's smart for them to just keep it the way it is with these 3 tight ends. They really like them, and so I really like where they're at right now with this roster with the tight end position. It's a new look offensive line in LA, and that's going to start from left to right. You have Joseph Nopum at left tackle. You have David Edwards at left guard. You have Brian Allen at center. At right guard, you're going to have Coleman Shelton. At right tackle, you're going to have Rob Havenstein. So those are your 5, but I have them keeping 9s. Who are the other 4 guys that I think the Rams are going to keep on the offensive line? Well, I've changed it up a little bit. Initially, I did have A.J. Arcuri making the roster. I have since added him to the cut list. In addition to that, Bobby Evans, Chandler Brewer, Max Percher, who will go on to the practice squad, and Jack Snyder. So that means that I'm going to end up having the Rams keeping Logan Bruss, obviously, the 3rd-round rookie. And on top of that, I'm going to have them keeping Tremaine Ankrum. On top of that, I'm going to have him keeping Alaric Jackson. And the 4th and final guy is Jeremiah Colon, who I did not expect to be keeping here. I like the versatility here. He can play both guard positions. He can play center. I think it's really an important thing here because Arcuri did not look ready necessarily to be on a 53-man roster. If you can't say for sure he is or is not one of the best 53, if he's not a top 53 player on this 90-man, now 85-man roster, it's hard to justify keeping him just because he was a 7th-round pick. They've cut guys in the past that have been 7th-rounders, and as this team continues to get better, it's going to be harder to make this team for anybody. So I think he'll be able to slide right on the practice squad. They'll be able to continue to develop him, build him up, but I don't think they need to keep him on the roster. I think he would make it through waivers pretty easily. I don't think they'd have to worry about that, but I do have Arcuri missing the cut, and I do have Cologne now taking his spot because I think now you have the upside of having guys like Ankrum that can play literally every position on the, out of those 5. You have Alaric Jackson, who was, playing left tackle, playing right tackle. He even played guard in the preseason. And now on top of that, you have Bruss, who can play guard and tackle, although mainly they want him to be a guard. So because of that, and because you have Coleman Shelton potentially being your right guard, who's really your backup center, if things do change, obviously you do have to shuffle it up. But I trust Jeremiah Colon at center. I think this is somebody that they've continued to try to build up, and he is here for a reason. I think he is absolutely going to make a push to be on this roster. He's on my roster. We'll see if the Rams add him, but I do like Cologne and the versatility he possesses for the Rams. Very important position at center, so I definitely would not mind the Rams having 3 guys there at center for sure. So that's how I see it with the offensive line. Now moving over to the defensive side of the ball, we have the defensive line headlined by the best in the league, Aaron Donald. In addition to that, we have Ashawn Robinson and Greg Gaines. No-brainers there. I like number 4 here. I really like the contributions he's had, the production he's had, and of course the development he's had. A guy that's not talked about nearly enough, and a guy that did not play at all in the preseason game 1, Marquise Copeland, the former UDF out of Cincinnati, a big favorite among the defensive line, and so he is going to be the 4th guy here, with Bobby Brown, of course, going to the suspended list. They don't have to add him to the 53 until way later on. And then in addition to that, I have them keeping, and it was tough for me, but I have them keeping Michael Hoyt. I actually very much considered keeping only 4 defensive linemen. And I understand that's kind of ridiculous because you do need to have more depth than that. But the Rams they have such a surplus at certain positions to the point where I don't even think you can justify cutting these guys because they're so good. And they are 100% part of the best 53 on the team. I'm a big believer in keeping the best players that you can. If you have a guy who is 72nd, for instance, out of 90, and you keep him over a guy that is probably 35th on your team because of a need, I just don't think that is smart football. I don't think that's smart decision making. And so for that reason, I decide to kind of go in a different direction, so to speak. But I really like what Hoyt brings to the table. He looked really good in preseason. He's looked really good in the regular season as a rotational guy. And so I have him making the team. That does unfortunately mean that some tough cuts are ahead. I have Ernest Brown, the 4th, who I do like, and I'm hoping he'll be back on the practice squad, eventually get onto that active roster. The former draft pick out of Northwestern, I do have him missing the cut. I also, in addition, have Jonah Williams missing the cut. This one pains me. I'm a big fan of his game. I really like him. I hope he can make it on the practice squad as well. But he seems like somebody who, obviously, if you're coming from the Rams, you're going to have a target on your back. People are going to know you. People are going to know that you played in the Super Bowl, all of that. So I can't imagine that the Rams would expect to be able to get Jonah Williams back on the practice squad. He is very good, very worthy of a 53-man roster spot. It's just how the numbers game worked out for me. And then, of course, you have TJ Carter, the guy they just signed, or rather they just claimed off of the waiver wire from Kentucky. Not the TJ Carter in the defensive back room, but TJ Carter from Kentucky, the defensive end. I have them cutting him. I don't really know much about him. He comes to the Rams pretty late in the game. I can't imagine he's actually going to make the roster. So he gets the cut here. Maybe he'll go on the practice squad. Who knows? And in addition to that, I have Elijah Garcia. Pains me to say it. He's a friend of the show. But I do think the numbers just don't really work out in his favor. I really like his game, and I think he could really develop if he stays in this building and signs on their practice squad. But that is how I have the defensive line. A good defensive line, not as depth-filled as you would expect, but I do think that they can afford to cut corners in a sense because of the rules. You can have these guys in the practice squad and you can call them up on game day. I do think this is a position where you'd want to take advantage of that. Maybe an Ernest Brown, maybe somebody like Jonah Williams if he can make the team or make the practice squad, doesn't get, he does get through waivers, all of that. And then Elijah Garcia, I think that's plenty of depth that they can get those guys on the practice squad. But we'll see in regards to that. That's how I have the roster, only keeping 5 defensive linemen in this one. Next up, we have the outside linebackers here, and I think this is pretty straightforward. It's easier than years past. I think you're definitely going to have, obviously, Leonard Floyd, Justin Hollins, Terrell Lewis, Chris Garrett, and I think the only thing that would be in question is Daniel Hardy being a 7th-round pick. Not for me. I think he's very clearly going to make this team. You saw it in preseason, the flashes of brilliance. This guy is an athlete. He is going to be able to be developed by the likes of the Rams coaching staff, and hopefully at some point he could be a starter down the road. I have them keeping 5. He'll be the last one. Unfortunately, that does mean that Benton Whitley, who really blew me away last weekend against the Chargers, I have him missing the cut. I do have the man out of Holy Cross going on to the practice squad, so I'm a big fan of his. I think the Rams will keep him in the building. He offers a lot more than people would expect, and so I thought he really had a good preseason game. I expect him to have more good preseason games moving forward, but I don't think the Rams are going to keep 6 pass rushers on this team. And so for that reason, I only had them keeping 5. Whitley misses the cut. Keir Thomas and Braden Thomas, who also had some good production in preseason, I have them missing the cut as well. Could be practice squad candidates. So that is how I have this position shaping up. That doesn't mean the Rams can't go out and get somebody like a D Ford who is in free agency right now, or maybe trade for somebody, whether it's a Robert Quinn at the trade deadline, maybe even Brian Burns if the Panthers season goes up in flames like I believe it will. But aside from that, this is how I have it, and I don't think the Rams need to go out and get anybody because there were plenty of times where they could have drafted somebody and they opted not to. They did like who was in the building, and so that speaks volumes. So that's why I have it the way, it's why I have it the way I have it. The Rams were able to go out and get Bobby Wagner in the offseason, and I really like where the linebacker room looks right now with him and Ernest Jones. They don't need to keep a ton of linebackers. I'll continue to say this because basically their star role, and on top of that, they have a lot of pseudo linebackers, guys in the safety realm that can really play that spot. You talk about Taylor Rapp, who's already been in that role, Terrell Burgess, Nick Scott, and Jordan Fuller could all play linebacker. I think even Quentin Lake could. So those are definitely some guys to keep in mind when you think about why I am keeping it so short in the linebacker room. Unfortunately, and this is a big one for me, I want to keep Jake Hummel. I think he is the better linebacker. I think he's the 3rd best linebacker on the team, but Christian Roseboom didn't play, and I have a rule of thumb, if a guy doesn't play and he's not hurt, he likely is already on the roster. He likely already has a spot on the roster. He didn't play in preseason. That is very telling that he could have a spot on the roster. And so I'm going to say that Christian Roseboom makes this team. Jake Hummel's the first one off. I really like him. I think, hopefully he can make the practice squad. It's going to be a tough one because he's going to be tough to get back. I think he's really good. I think he offers a lot. And he was one of my favorite UDFA linebackers that were available. So this is somebody here that I'm hoping the Rams can get back, but I don't expect him to make it over Christian Roseboom after watching Christian Roseboom take off preseason and he was fully healthy. So it's not anything like that. In addition to that, unfortunately, I am cutting Jake Gervais as well, and I'm cutting Anthony Hines III. Shout out to Anthony Hines III. He had an unbelievable game on special teams, really stood out to me. And Jake Gervais showed you that he is improving from moving from safety to linebacker, that unique skill set, very athletic profile, one of the most athletic profiles for a linebacker in NFL history when you put relative athletic score to the test. I like that he has taken strides. He has gotten better. You saw it. He's a better tackler. He was better in coverage. But at the same time, I think this is somebody they can still bring back onto the practice squad, continue to develop him, and maybe he's a weapon down the line that could end up getting some decent playing time. Who knows? But I'm really hoping they're able to keep both he and Jake Hummel moving forward. That's how I have it. I have them only keeping 3 linebackers. Again, you're going to have to give a little to get a little. And so while you're going out and you're keeping Perkins and you're keeping McCutcheon and you're keeping those bubble guys, maybe you're adding, an extra offensive lineman, you're going to have to trim the fat here. And so I have them keeping only 3 linebackers because of the versatility in the back end, the secondary, and so they can keep other guys that we've already mentioned. Can't remember a time where the Rams were this loaded at corner, and not just this loaded, but like this loaded with young talent. Obviously, you have Jalen Ramsey, who is the best corner in football and is probably going to get an opportunity to play some safety this year as well. He was very much utilized in that star role last year, but now they add Troy Hill, a friend of his, comes back to the team after going to the Browns last year. He signed with the Browns, and now he's with the Rams via a trade. He is back with the Rams. I think he is going to help tremendously being on the other side of Jalen Ramsey. And so I'm excited for those two. I'm excited for Jacoby Durant, the 4th round pick out of South Carolina State. I'm excited now for Darion Kendrick, the 6th round pick out of Georgia. I'm excited for Robert Rochelle and his emergence. And on top of that, I'm excited for David Long. And David Long is one of the only ones that I mentioned, in addition to Jalen Ramsey and Troy Hill, that did not play in preseason. So there's a chance, even though it's his contract year, he could be in for a big role this year. He showed flashes last year, had a really good season, I thought. So like I said, I think it's a very loaded group. And on top of that, I will say they're cutting some guys that are very loaded here. I really like TJ Carter. I think he's been pretty solid in preseason based on what I saw in the first game. I do like Tyler Hall. I like the familiarity he has with defensive coordinator Raheem Morris. I like Duron Lowe, but even furthermore, I really like Grant Haley. And Haley was on the Super Bowl roster. So it's not crazy to see that, why the Rams would like him. You can see now why the Rams didn't sign Dante Dion back, because they are so loaded in the secondary. He's probably just on speed dial. If they need him, they'll call him. But right now, the Rams are so loaded in the secondary that they don't need him. And unfortunately, they're going to have to make the tough decision to cut a guy like Grant Haley, who offers the ability in special teams as a returner and just as a guy that can work on special teams. He also offers the ability as a sound tackler. You saw it in preseason. The game last week, I thought he was very good. That 3rd down stop he had was huge. I really like Grant Haley. He is very close to making this roster. If they didn't draft Darion Kendrick, I think they might have kept him, but unfortunately he's going to miss the cut. Hopefully they can get him on the practice squad as well as some of these other guys, but that's how I have the cornerbacks playing out. 6 on the cornerback slot. Normally the Rams would go with 4, sometimes 5, but they have way too much talent this year. Unless they trade somebody, then they're going to have to keep 6 because there's just too much talent in this cornerback room to let go. If you told me at the beginning of last year that Nick Scott would emerge as the go-to safety in the back end of the secondary, I would have said you were crazy. Even after week 18, I would have said you were crazy because he played an awful game against the San Francisco 49ers. However, down the stretch and into the postseason, the Cardinals game, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers game, and the Super Bowl, Nick Scott came to play, and he has earned himself a starting job. He started in the Super Bowl with Eric Weddle. He is all of a sudden emerged as the guy following the injury of Jordan Fuller, his second season going down with a season-ending ankle injury. Taylor Rapp being unable to stay healthy, although he is listed as a shared starter with Jordan Fuller. But I think Nick Scott, the former 7th-round pick, 243rd overall in the 2019 draft, has really emerged, and I think there's a chance that he's even brought back and breaks the mold of the fact that normally the Rams don't sign safeties. They don't re-sign safeties. However, I could see him being brought back. Nick Scott is the guy here. Obviously, he's going to make the team. Jordan Fuller will make the team. I do have Terrell Burgess making the team, but I was concerned to see him playing in preseason since no one else was. Obviously, I think Taylor Rapp makes the team, and I think Quentin Lake's going to make the team, but this is really where all of a sudden things start to get a little weird. Okay, the Rams really like Quentin Lake, and so do I, obviously. He was a 6th-round pick out of UCLA, and this is somebody that I think can really, he has a little bit of everything. I think he's got a little bit of, John Johnson in him and Jordan Fuller. So this is somebody they definitely look forward to on special teams, can come in and right away play on special teams. He's a great guy. He's a culture guy. You definitely want him in your locker room. But on top of that, I think he has the ability to play on the defense as early as this year. He doesn't need to start right away, but I think he can definitely contribute. The problem is with Quentin Lake is that we haven't seen him in preseason. Unfortunately, what we found out is that Quentin Lake has an undisclosed injury that has forced him on the PUP list. We'll see if he comes back, because if he doesn't come back, the Rams might just be better off keeping him on the PUP list, bringing him back after the 4 games, and figuring out the roster after the 4 games that he would have to sit out to start the season. That's the thing. So when you look at it, not really sure what to make of it. I have them keeping Lake because I don't think they want to cut 2 of their safeties. So Lake, that makes 5 safeties there. I do have them keeping Lake. I have them cutting Russ East. I have them cutting J-Ron McVay, and I have them cutting Daniel Isom. All 3 of which I believe could definitely be on the practice squad. We'll see how that ends up shaping up. But that's how I have the safeties there. I think the 4 are a lock, even with what people are saying about Terrell Burgess. I really think that he is being slept on here. He's had a rough go. He's had an injury. Guys have taken over. We'll see moving forward what happens with him. Things are going to open up in the next couple of years, too. As long as he's around with the Rams, does not get cut, you're going to have Taylor Rapp going into he's already in a contract year, so you're gonna have him going in free agency. You're gonna have Nick Scott going to free agency. So doors do open up here for Terrell Burgess, and the Rams have been known to really play things safe. They've been known to play the long game with guys, wait time, and that there's a thing here. I mean, I would not be surprised if Burgess eventually gets an opportunity, if it's next year, or even if it's during this season. I would not be surprised at all. But Quentin Lake is the one intriguing spot here because we haven't seen him play, and he has been on the PUP list. So we'll see how that goes. I have the Rams keeping him. Lastly, that means, of course, we have the special teams, which is a no-brainer. No one is competing at this point. It's Matt Gay, it is Riley Dixon, and Matt Orzech. No one is competing against any of them. I don't know if there'll be a camp guy signed, but they did cut Cameron Dicker, a guy that I think will be back on the practice squad. I think that's why they cut him so early, to kind of sneak him through. But that's how I have that. As far as my 17-man practice squad goes, I have Jake Funk. Somehow I have him clearing waivers, getting on there, as well as Asim Rose. I have Austin Trammell, only 1 wide receiver because they have 8. There's no point of keeping more than 1, even though Koski and I think Landon Akers the Rams like. Tight end, I have Jamal Pettigrew. I could also see them keeping Roger Carter, but I had Jamal Pettigrew. I think that's why they cut him early on, to try to sneak him through. In addition to that, the offensive line, you kept 9. So in this one, I have them going with 1 more here with A.J. Arcuri. You have a guy in Maximilian Percher who automatically gets reverted to the practice squad, so no worries there. In addition to that, I have them keeping 3 defensive linemen to combat the fact that they only have 5 on this roster. I almost even had 4, and those 3 defensive linemen I have are Elijah Garcia, Jonah Williams, and Ernest Brown IV. I think with Jonah Williams, it's a little bit more hope than realism, but it's not to say that it's impossible, and Jonah Williams isn't exactly a superstar. I just think there are teams now that realize he can be a good player, he can be a contributor, he can help you in a rotation. Hell, he could potentially be a starter down the road. So I wouldn't be surprised if he does get picked up, but if he doesn't, that I really like the way this practice squad is shaping up for the Rams. Benton Whitley is my next guy. Keir Thomas and Braden Thomas, I think all are deserving, but I think the Rams are going to opt to just keep one pass rusher, and I think Whitley is the guy that you want to keep. That speed rush off the edge, you can develop that. I think you could turn him into something, so I like keeping Benton Whitley out of Holy Cross on the practice squad. In addition to that, I have the Rams keeping 2 linebackers here, Jake Gervais and Jake Hummel. So 2 Jakes are going to stay here. And the reason I have this, it's very simple. When you look at what's going on with the Rams linebackers, I didn't mention earlier, but you guys already know Travin Howard is on the non-football injury list. He does not have to come off. They can keep him there. I think they should keep him there. Wait until the 4 weeks after and then bring him back. They don't need to rush it. Roseboom makes the roster. You only have 3 linebackers because, like I said, you have the versatility in the back and the secondary. And so I think you could take advantage of that for sure. You can bring back Travin Howard after week 4. But in the meantime, you can add both Jakes, Jake Hummel and Jake Gervais, develop them on the practice squad. As long as they clear waivers, it's going to be hard to get, I think, Hummel. I think Gervais can come back. Hummel's going to be difficult. But if they can swing this, I think these are definitely guys that you want in your room. You want these guys in the building, and eventually they could be coming back next year or even at the end of this year or the middle of this year and helping you should an injury occur. And obviously you're playing a very dangerous sport that has a lot of injuries, so I think it's smart to definitely bolster your linebackers there, especially when you're only carrying 3 on the active roster. In addition to that, I had them keeping 2 corners, Grant Haley and TJ Carter. I like Carter. I've said it before. I like him as a UDFA. I think he's the guy that they would add to the practice squad. In addition to that, Grant Haley is more so a hopeful thing. I think he's done enough to be on an active 53. The Rams are just so loaded, they can't keep 7 corners by any stretch. So I do have him on the practice squad. We'll see if it actually works, but Haley has so many things he offers that it's hard to be able to get a guy like that. So we'll see what ends up happening. And around this thing out, I have Russ Yeast, the draft pick from this year. I have Daniel Isom, who iced the game against the Chargers with the game-winning interception. And I have Cameron Dicker, a kicker/punter that I think will, be able to develop. He's the guy that can come in next year. I think he can end up being the punter in taking over for Riley Dixon. We'll see what ends up happening. But I don't think that the Rams want to let him go, and I think that's why they cut him early on in the process to try to sneak him on there. But that's how I have it. This is my 53-man roster projection, part 2, following the Rams' first preseason game. As we move into the Houston game on Friday, this is right ahead of that. So things will change next week when I have another roster projection. I will edit it based on everything accordingly. But that's going to do it for me. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to like, subscribe, and comment. Really does help out the channel. It helps me out, helps this video out, and I will see you guys soon. You guys take care. Later.